Good afternoon. My name is Diane Varga, and I'm with Family Partners of Morris and Sussex Counties. I would like to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn. Today is August 1st, 2024, and today's speaker is Elizabeth Nuss with the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. She will be sharing information on becoming a foster and adoptive parent. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hello, thank you for having me today. It's a little nervous for me, nervous energy, so bear with me. I'm happy to see that we have a nice group. I was like expecting, I was like, oh my God, I'm like, what if there's like 100 people on the call? I was like, you guys, I could manage. There's like 6 to 10. I'm like, that's fine. That actually just dropped my anxiety a whole level. But I'm not sure if you've met me in the past. I try to be out there in different meetings and to kind of share information. But if you don't know me, my name is Elizabeth Nuss, and I have been working with the division now pretty much almost 16 years. We have went through a lot of changes over the years. A majority of my work with the division has been in the resource realm. Not a lot of people are familiar with what resource is. Most people are always like casework, working directly with our families that we are, that need child protective service supports. But me in resource, I work with just general public most of the time. I work with people who want to come into the program, who want to be a licensed resource parent or adoption parent from the state of New Jersey. This PowerPoint will kind of show you how things have changed a little bit. We have always branded ourselves as you can make a difference, become a foster adoptive parent, right? That's always been open your heart, open your home is always been our thing. And I think that's been with us at least 20 years. But as I had mentioned, I didn't know if you heard me talking earlier, we went to rebranding to hopefully make us look more friendly, more welcoming. So we have the Join Our Village logo. It's kind of based on, it takes a village to raise a child, which is so true, right? I mean, the more support you have, usually there's better outcomes all around for everyone, especially the child. But this is our new branding. So it's to Join Our Village. I'm going to give you my information also at the end if you have any special questions, or you could always get in touch with Diane to get in touch with me. But these are a few more of our new advertisings. So again, it's focusing on family. Join Our Village can go for anyone, right? We're looking for relative care. When I see this, I'm like, this looks like a really nice relative care picture advertising, right? You have the older generation, the newer generation. Sometimes we have our grandparents caring for our kids, which is a great thing to keep kids with someone familiar. We have our other image that we've been using lately. Again, Join Our Village. We have the ability to license same-sex couples. We have a lot of same-sex couples that actually adopt through us. So, that's another benefit of our program, because some people want to expand their family and just may not know how to do that. And again, we are a New Jersey licensed adoption agency. For some people who may not realize that, yes, we do have legally clear children, meaning they don't have any parental ties connected to them. And we try to find what we call forever families to take to possibly adopt them. And that's a process in itself. So we have two different programs. the fostering in the adoption program. Um, so, this is pretty much the meat and potatoes of the presentation. We are working within a child welfare system, right? So again, I work for the Department of Children and Families, the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, who was DCP, which is DCP&P, previously DIFUS. And we have our 800 number that if you suspect child abuse or neglect, that in New Jersey, we're all mandated reporters to report that. You can report anonymously, right? Because some people may not feel comfortable. But it's important. It's just not police officers that call, or nurses or doctors or hospitals. It's everyday people call. It could be a neighbor, it could be a family member. And again, the safety of the kids is paramount to us. Once the call comes into our call center in Trenton, we have to evaluate that and see the urgency to get out to that family's home. It is in more severe situations, it could be immediate response, depending on the situation. But we do investigate all allegations of abuse and neglect. Um, you know, I'm really not here today to talk about our CPS stuff. My main goal is always to say, well, what happens once we have that kid in our car, in the state car? And everybody usually looks at me and they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, we put a kid in a state car and we have to do something with that child. Like, where is that child going that day, right? Because if anyone knows anything about foster care, we place that day in a licensed home, because again, it's a myth. We don't have a bedroom in our state office, right? Like, do you know what I mean? It's the kids have to go somewhere, and that somewhere is usually a licensed resource parent in our community. Um, we work within a welfare system, which involves, the court system, the family practice division. So anytime we have to take custody, um, we have to go in front of a judge and say, hey, judge, we did this because of this. And that judge has to agree with that decision we made and that we took someone's kids. So just understand that it's just not always our decision as DCP&P. There is an entire system that's involved with the work that we do. And then, like yourself and many of you on this call, if you're a community partner, we depend on you guys to help us get the support that the family needs to get their kids back. Right. So, we're really, the main goals is to keep the child safe, right? And to pretty much affect change so we can get those kids back home. And reunification is our primary goal. Um, you know, I can't say it enough because, again, foster care is so misunderstood. And just so many things that I hear is just, like, can I keep them? And that's sweet. Like, so many people are always like, if I take a child, I want to keep them. And I say, I understand that, but you have to also understand that child came from a family who wants them back, right? And pretty much our goal for our resource family is to pretty much love them, keep them safe temporarily, get them through probably one of the most difficult times of their lives, and let's get them back home. Um, Statistically, and we don't usually give out a lot of statistics, 85% of the time, which the number went up, is really great. We're keeping kids in home, right? We're not doing a removal. So that, again, talk about myths and things. And when I was even a kid, there was always the fear, oh, DIFUS is going to come take your kids, right? Like that was always something, like, even as a kid or me as a mom, like, oh, the fear, like, oh my God, typhus is gonna come take my kids. And honestly, there has to be something really, really bad going on in that house in order for us to take someone's kids. These are the main reasons. It has to actually meet a legal criteria. Again, because we're going into the courts. It has to meet what's called imminent risk of harm or danger. Of course, physical or sexual abuse of a child is on that, neglect of a child, substance, um, parental substance abuse. That is our number one reason, I would say, why we have to do a removal. Because there's so many different things going on. There could be an arrest where we have to incarcerate a caretaker. There could be an overdose, whether, actually there's a death or whether or not there's someone going into a hospital. So again, in my experience, it's usually that substance abuse situation that is probably the number one reason. Domestic violence, mental health instability, incapacity to parent or guardian, and failure to protect a child from harm. And again, it has to be able to be proven in court, because that judge, I believe we have to go to court within 72 hours. Our DAG has to present in court on the behalf of the division why we removed and took custody of someone's kids. It's a whole process. And, I can honestly say we're cautious. A majority of the time, our removals are upheld, right? They stick. There is on occasion a small percentage where the judge may say no, put them back. But we try, right? When the child's not the child, but when the birth family goes to court in front of a judge, that judge will make a uh, extensive court order tailored to what that child's family needs to do to get the child back in their home, right? That makes sense. And it's tailored to what their specific situation is. So the court order may say, if it's substance abuse issues, they will say, okay, you need evaluations, substance abuse evaluations. You may need to go, depending on what the assessment said, you may need to go for inpatient, you may need to go for outpatient services. You may need to go into drug court. You may need to go to random urine screens. There's a whole list of things that birth family needs to do to keep momentum going, to working towards reunification. There may be parenting classes that they may need to take. They may have to go for psychologicals. Again, it's really dependent on the situation, and if there's a psychiatric component to things. But again, that's where we look at that welfare system and why you guys are so important, because our service providers are there to support us and support our families on our main goal of reunification. And within that order too is usually parental visits, which is important to mention because we do try to keep the family bonded to the child. Depending on the situation, the judge will order a specific amount of time that family comes in and has supervised visits per week, right? And that's changed over the years also. In my experience, it's really case by case and dependent on, again, the risk factors of, what's going on with the family. The types of resource families that we have is our foster care, which I keep on mentioning. They are unrelated. We have our foster care with interest to adopt option, which, sometimes happens where we have to ask a judge to terminate parental rights based on our Adoption and Safe Families Act. If you're not familiar with the Adoption and Safe Families Act, I would Google it. It's relatively new. It's from the 1990s. It's a federal act, I think, from the Clinton administration that pretty much gives us time frames on how long a child should remain in state foster care. It's so important because, you know, we want permanency. We don't want kids to linger in foster care forever. So, you know, we use that as our time frames and guidelines in our practice. And that's how sometimes, you know, we are or we have our adoption option for families because we have kids in our state custody that um, are legally cleared, but we've not been able to find a family, a forever family for them. Um, you know, kinship care again is paramount where we are told nowadays that, um, you know, by 7 days into placement, 60% of the time we want kids with family or a family friend. And then by day 30, we want 80% of the time those kids with either family, um, relative, or family friend. That is our best choice. And that kind of goes with our preserving kinship connections that this administration um, had brought on as part of like a strategic transformative goal of this administration to keeping kids with kin or a family friend because they felt that it increases placement stability. There's better behavioral and mental health outcomes. And also, there's a higher level of permanency when kids are placed with a family member, relative, or family friend. Um, you know, I'm really cautious with time today, so I'm kind of go through things. Um, you know, I could just impress upon you that foster care is supposed to be temporary, right? And I'm going to just do this little diagram for you because it's just so important because I do this to all my folks when I meet people. I'm like, foster care is like when you raise one hand and say, sure, I'll take a kid, and you're going to put the kid home, right? Foster to adopt, you're going to put two hands in the air and you're going to take a roller coaster ride. A roller coaster ride of not knowing what's going to happen for about 2.5 years, 3 years. It's a roller coaster ride that most adoption families will say, I'll go back on it. Because they're happy with the ending. But to get to that point, it is quite stressful. And there's a lot of twists and turns in not knowing. In our forced adopt program, there is no guarantees that you will be able to adopt at the end. And you personally, spiritually, in yourself have to be okay with that. You have to understand that these kids belong to their family, right? And until they don't, then you're able to adopt them. Um, and again, it's all based on that Adoption and Safe Families Act, where we have those court mandated time frames, which is about realistically a year in. We're kind of looking at things and trying to figure out why we can't reunify and what those barriers are. A year and a half in, we're still really looking at things and usually have a concurrent goal of adoption to foster family. But usually by 2 years, if things, and I'm being very generous, a year and a half, 2 years, we're really then going to go to the judge or into the courts to say, what are we going to do here? Can we look at termination of parental rights? And again, the reason behind that is because we want permanency for our kids. Um, you know, there's there's this outcomes for our kids, right? And we pound that reunification, um, you know, that concept out there all the times: reunification, reunification, reunification. So yes, if we can if that's our primary goal, we're going to do it. We're going to get those kids back home. But if we can't, then we're going to look towards adoption. A majority of our families who are doing our foster to adopt program, when it comes down to the 2.5, 3 year mark, and we're asking them, are you going to adopt? A majority of them say yes, um, which is a good thing, right? I mean, we want those kids to be able to remain with those families. There are special circumstances that happen where, maybe there's something going on in the house where they just don't want to go to that next level of finalization because maybe you have a family who's in the midst of a divorce. Maybe you have a family that may have a medical crisis. There's so many reasons sometimes why maybe our forced adopt family may choose not to adopt. Um, because sometimes people are like, oh, what's wrong with that child? Why didn't they want them? And there may not have been anything wrong with that child. It just may be something internally going on within that family unit that maybe we couldn't get to that point with them. We have the kinship legal guardianship category, which usually is utilized by family members or a family friend because they may not want to finalize a full adoption. And then for our kids who are older, and it's unfortunate, we have a lot of older kids, we have to get them prepared. What's the outcome for these kids that are 16 and older? I'm not sure if you're aware, but our kids from 18, when they age out, can keep themselves signed into the division till 21. And then usually they're getting these what's called other planned permanent living arrangement, which is usually independent living programs and things like that. Again, trying to support the older teenagers to be prepared if they age out at 21. Um, and again, I apologize for going so fast, but it's so much information today. So the newest thing that I could say, because we used to have open general recruitment, meaning we used to take applications for everything, right? If you wanted to come in for an infant, we would license you. But nowadays we are down to what we call um, target recruitment, meaning that we are looking for families to come into our program um, with specific needs. Like these are the scenarios or the types of children that we most need homes for. And that's our kids with complex medical, behavioral, or developmental needs, our adolescents, and our sibling groups of 4 or more, which some people say to me, they shake their head and they're like, 4 or more. I'm like, yes, 4 or more. And then our New Jersey children cleared for adoption. So right now, if you're coming into our program, we want you to take one of those groups, right? And a majority of the time, and again, I'm a general recruiter. I cover both Morris and Sussex County and been doing this a long time. People are like, but they get scared. They will be like, well, teenagers are difficult. Complex needs sounds like it would be very difficult. Like, I mean, like, so I'm here to kind of say to you, yes, it's scary, but I'm going to go over a few of the different categories in each of these to kind of like try to make you feel less scared. Under that complex medical, we have still our infants that are coming from the hospital that have been exposed to narcotics during pregnancy. So some people are like, oh, maybe I can do that, right? Um, and that's again in the forced adopt category. We have our kids with uh, more chronic illness, those like type 1 diabetes. Maybe there's epilepsy, like seizure disorder, sickle cell anemia. are kids on the autism spectrum. And again, if you're familiar with autism, that spectrum is a wide range of type of challenges, behavioral challenges. Um, again, you have to feel comfortable with the child you're taking in your home. We have children that may have mobility issues or developmental or intellectual, um, you know, uh, disabilities. So, it's one of those things where it's a wide array of complex needs, and there's probably so many more that I didn't even mention. But we're not asking you to take all. Like some people will say that, like, I have to take all of I have to agree to all of that. And I'm like, no, you don't have to agree to all of that. You just have to be able to agree to possibly taking, you know, one or two of the categories. um, we have our teenagers are teenagers. Like I say to people, I love teenagers. I had two teenagers. Mine now are 18 and 21. They're home for the summer now, and I enjoyed my teenage years with my kids. Um, some people say, well, Liz, you have a relatively normal, stable home. I'm just like, okay. And I say to myself, yeah. And I said, these kids that are coming in from our care didn't have an option not to have a safe and stable home. They kind of were exposed to things that no one should be exposed to, but that's not at their fault. And yes, they have trauma, and they may not know what your normal is. They may have experienced a different normal, but again, that's not to say that they don't need love and um, the support from a family to get them, um, again, probably through one of the most difficult times of their lives, and um, help them grow as people. Adolescence is a time period of major brain development, which youth learn critical decision making and coping skills necessary to become healthy, functioning adults and productive adults. So I always say, and I see it even with my kids, especially my older son. Um, I could see the difference that we've had in some of the kids that they've had in our home. I always like to say I've been the unlicensed foster mom, right? Because I can't be licensed because I work for the state. But my kids, with the way we've raised them, or just in their genetics, they've brought home kids, like kids that needed help, or kids that have been going through a hard time at their homes, and we just have taken them in over the years. I could remember with my daughter, she'd always come home and say, Mommy, she's like, I think I need to invite so and so over, and I'd be like, okay, you can have her over. And she'd be like, she's like, Mommy, can we give them a bag of stuff to bring home? And I'm just like, I'm not sure we could do that, but we'll see what we can do. But it's just like, it's like those simple things that you don't realize that you just naturally do is kind of part of what we do, what foster parents do, right? Um, let's see, our siblings in best settings is self-explanatory. The difference is that this program is a statewide program, and we want you again to take four or more siblings to keep them together. Unfortunately, we always can't keep siblings together, right? And they're broken apart. We may have a family who says, they'll raise their hand and say, "Yeah, I'll take the baby," and then you'll say, "Well, okay, but how about the 13-year-old, right?" And then we'll have to break that sibling group apart, and again, that's stressful, right? That especially if you've had an older child who's been parentified and taking care of that younger child. Um, Again, that's something that we never really think about, but this program is hopefully geared towards trying to keep our large sibling groups together. Um, you know, our Our legally cleared youth is a whole other nutshell. Um, these kids, and I'm going to be very honest, um, have probably went through, I don't want to say like just the worst few years of their life. Just picture the scenario where, again, putting that kid in the car and where are we going to place them, right? And we always try to find first placement is best placement. But as we all know, sometimes placements don't work and we have to shift them around and put them with many different homes. Um, but that's beside the point. Um, the thing with our legally cleared kids is that once we get to that point where we terminate parental rights, um, there's a major loss there. There's a loss when they can't go back home with their birth family, right? Um, so many different losses. Sometimes they could lose, again, they lose their parents. They could lose a sibling because a sibling is maybe adopted by another family. Though we do try to maintain sibling bonds through sibling visits. Um, Sometimes things happen. Then you have compounded issues where we've had resource families who have taken on those not the siblings, have taken on a child and then has pretty much had like a disruption where we've had to move them several times. And every time we do that, the child's experiencing loss. So we're so cautious with our legally cleared kids because we understood how much loss they've been through, that, we really try to match them the best with our adoption families coming in. We match, right? So a lot of times think it's the other way around. Like some people will go on the computer and go into the nj.org site and pick a picture and say, I want that kid. We don't really promote that. We really don't want that. We want to be able to do a home study on you and match you based on who that child is and who the family is. Because when you look at those pictures online, you're not going to get a full picture of who that child is and what their needs are. So just understand that, our adoption services, again, we're a licensed adoption agency within the Department of Children and Families. Um, you know, we have kids, some of them are photo listed. But in my experience, you can go to that njadopt.org site and you'll see them. They're featured. There's like little pictures and a blurb. But that's not even the tip of the iceberg of who that child is, right? Because there's so many things that may be going on with that child that we can't really, due to privacy reasons, just put out there. So we do the match, hopefully through our exchange unit, by reading that home study about the licensed family and making sure that it's a good match. There are other kids too that aren't on the New Jersey website because honestly, some of our kids are like, no way, no way, Jose, I don't want to be on a website with my picture because, what if my friends see that? What if my friends see me on a website? I think we had an instance like that in Newton where we had a child, and then I don't know who saw it, but somebody saw it and it kind of went through the high school. And, that would have been devastating to a teenager that, that was going around. Um, so again, there are other kids, and these numbers of our kids in this category is fluid. It's always changing because we have families that adopt and then say tomorrow we go to court on a Friday and maybe we have to terminate parental rights on a specific a specific family, and a child comes into the system that, again, we're going to start looking for a family for. So again, it's fluid. In this category, a majority of our kids are adolescents, kids with complex needs, and sibling groups. Again, I'm being cognizant of time. Um, The only other thing I want to say about my adoption families is this is a slow process. Like I mentioned, that the day of placement with our kids, if we have to do an investigation and we're doing foster care placement, that kid's placed that day. With our adoption matches, it is a slow process. It is turtle slow. Like it is like slow to the means of, there's a match process, there's meetings, there's visitation, there's because by no means do we want to put a child in a adoption family home and then have it disrupted, and again that child incurring another loss. So people say to me, well, why is it so long? Like, what's this? Because we are cautious. We don't want to put our kids in a position where they're going to be rejected. Um, so, you have to understand that. Um, you know, Wrapping up, we expect you guys as licensed resource families to come in and be part of the team, right? Which makes sense. We've really, maybe when Diane was part of it, it was kind of a little different. But nowadays, our licensed resource families are actually part of our team. They are working with us side by side and helping do what's best in the best interest of the child. Um, let's see. So pretty much licensed, um, to get licensed, um, and people say to me, well, Liz, there's just so many people that are part of this process. And I had so many people coming in and out of my house. There is. I'm not going to lie to you. There's people visiting you. There's people, caseworkers, resource workers, nurses, CASA workers, law guardians. There's a whole list of them that will come in and visit you. Your agency community support people, if they need to come in and visit, mobile response and stabilization services, if there's an issue going on in the house, they're going to come see you and they're going to try to help you. Again, this is supposed to be there to support you and support that child. There is money that comes in for the child. It's called a monthly board rate payment. And the child also, and that's per child per month. And the child also has Medicaid. So the child doesn't have to go on your private insurance. The child has Medicaid, state Medicaid. The money coming in for the child is really dependent on the level of care the child needs, an acuity score. So if the child has more complex needs, then there probably is more money attached to that child. Um, that's just being said. And then, most people don't realize that some of our kids, even after adoption finalization, have post-adoption subsidy, which actually after finalization, up until their 18th birthday, they get funds from the state of New Jersey. So they have a subsidy packet attached. And those are usually our kids that have been longest waiting. A lot of the kids that you would probably see on our website. Another support for you guys is our umbrella. It is the community agency that used to be called Foster Adoptive Family Services. So that's if Diane, if you're not familiar, FAFS, Foster Adoptive Family Services, was the old name, but now they're called Umbrella. Umbrella has an otter, little side story, has an otter as a logo. And I saw the woman last night because she had a support meeting at our Sussex office. And I'm like, why an otter? like why? And she goes, did you not know that otters actually will take on other people's, and not other people's, other animals, otters? Like they'll adopt some other otter and put them as part of their family. And I'm like, I did not know that. She's like, but yes, that was like the whole concept of the otter, is just that we're adoption and fostering, and the otter will do that in nature. So Umbrella is there to actually support our foster and adoption families through mentorship, through advocacy, through training, through a lot of fun events that they'll like put together, like summer picnics, Christmas parties, and such, where they really just want to bring the family, the foster and adoption families together to support one another. It's like a support network for them. Um, I like Umbrella. I work with them all the time as just a support and retention efforts for our families. Um, to come on board, you'd have to come see me, come in and get like an info session like you are tonight. I'd have to go through the process of what a home study would look like. There's an application process. We have to do fingerprinting, training, do reference checks on you guys, financial statement. Some people say to me, well, Liz, some people come in because they just want the money. And I'm like, but I get it. And I actually had someone who actually came in thinking it was a job. And I said, this is not a job. I was like, this is, and she said to me, there was a little bit of language barrier. And I think this is important to tell you this story. Um, there was a language barrier that I tried working within, and we couldn't kind of get the words right. And she goes, why do they become foster families? And I'm never asked that. I'm never, like, as a recruiter, like, why does someone wholeheartedly come in and be a foster family? And the word that I came up with that made sense to her was, I'm like, it's a volunteer. I said, you're volunteering to have a child in your home, to love them, and you're just doing it because you want to. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, as simple as it is, it's like when you say it and people say, well, why do they do this? I'm like, because they just want to love a child and want to be able to have them go back home. And even if that's temporary, it's selfless. It's it's something that you have to have a special calling for, because not everybody is meant to do this. And I've learned that over the years. It's like you find people who will actually tell you spiritually, this has been calling me. And I say, okay, I'm here to listen. And, I'm like, I'll see how this fits into what you're thinking. But yes, our people are coming in, and why people do this is because they want to help kids. And that is their main motivation, helping them however they can for even a short period of time. Um, One thing I also want to mention is that we have home study process, and we have Office of Licensing Inspection. Um, you know, I know that we're wrapping up, and I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions,
You've
but
got time, don't worry, Elizabeth.
I wanted to tell you too that this process of becoming a licensed resource parent is no fee to you. Um, Even though every time I say that, I always think in my mind of this heckler I had in my one of my group engagement sessions. She was in the background, and she's like, "But how about the time you told me I had to replace my railings on my front porch?" And I said, "I'm like, I understand that. I'm like, because you need to make the house safe. I'm like, there may be an expense for you to fix your home to make everyone safe." I said, but to think about it in most cases, if you were looking at private sector of doing this versus state of New Jersey, which that could be a whole nother presentation, is that this is literally no fee to you. There's no fee for the New Jersey license. There's no fee for the home study process, training, etc. The license is good for 3 years. And if you want to keep your license, you just roll it into another 3 years, as long as you're in good standing with us. But understand that there is no fee. And again, there's no fee because we want people in the community to come and be our partner and help us with our kids who need out of home placement. Um, that that'll always be. And some people will always say to me, they'll say, Liz Nuss, this isn't the right time for me because I can't take one of the target populations, the complex needs or the teenagers. And I say, okay, I'm not going to take that personally. I understand. And I said, I'm like, unfortunately, we're always going to be here, right? It's like there's always going to be a program like this that's going to be protecting and keeping our kids safe. So if this isn't the right time for you, then that's okay, right? That I'm not a salesperson who gets commissioned. I'm just a community educator who wants to make people aware of what our needs are. Um, and a majority of the time, because I'll go to like a rotary or something, and I look out in the crowd and I see them drop their heads as soon as I say I'm from DCP&P or Child Protective Services, I get the head drops. And then I say, wait, I'm like, I'm not here expecting you guys to be foster parents. And they go, really? And I'm like, I'm not here for money. Like, really? And I say, I'm just really here to want the opportunity to speak to you on how you could help our New Jersey kids. And that is in general just talking about it and telling people about our program, our needs, the possibility of whether they could open their home up to be a foster parent, right? That's the only thing I can ask for. I can't like say, okay, we have 6 people on the call and I'm expecting that you 6 were going to come into the program. That, in my experience with this, is that's not how this works. It really just works by building the relationships and spreading information, because the craziest things happen in life where next week you'd be sitting next to a person that you just meet and they say to you, I really, I can't have kids and I've been thinking about adoption, right? That could happen to you. It could happen to you within the year. And then after today's presentation, you could say, well, I saw this lady who she talked about the state foster care system. Have you ever thought about that? And then it'll spirit the conversation of, oh, maybe that's a possibility. I never thought about that. And then you could say, well, check it out. And, there is really no fee, like if you wanted to check it out and get licensed, and maybe it could, in the end, you know, have the ability to adopt a child. So again, it's more so really making those connections and asking you guys, how can you help? And helping is just by spreading awareness and telling people. We have our new logos, right? Again, this is really Join Our Village specific towards autism, because there are so many kids nowadays diagnosed with autism. And then we also have our teenagers. Pretty much, it's a sad situation when we don't have a home. Um, Sussex is very low right now on homes. Morris is pretty much low on homes, especially for teenagers. And if we have to place a teenager and there is no place to go, then they go to the shelter, the Morris County shelter. And that's only time limited. So, people say to me, Liz, like we need teenage homes. And I'm like, I'm trying. I like, and people don't realize if our own communities, so say Sussex County or Morris County does not have a home, then we have to, because we're a statewide program, we're going to try to find a home in our state of New Jersey, whether it's in Atlantic County, Salem County, until we could find a place for that child, which just disrupts so much. It disrupts education. It's a longer drive to do visits and such. But if we can, we would prefer to have our kids close to their own community and having those licensed homes within the community. But this is another one of our great logos that I found yesterday with trying to put this together. And this pretty much just exemplifies just our need with all those great kids playing basketball. But that's all I have for you. And I had left a little bit of time for you guys to ask questions.
Elizabeth, I thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and this important information. As I discussed before, this is like near and dear to my heart. So
Yeah.
I will stop the recording now. For anybody that came in a little late, you can find this recording on our Family Partners YouTube. It's on YouTube under Family Partners of Morris and Sussex, and all this information will be there probably by early next week. I will stop the recording now and open it up to questions.